Hello, this is Dr. Laura. I want to take this moment to welcome each and every one of you to Real Talk with Dr. Laura. Here, where we talk about faith, life, and everything in between. Well, guess what, everybody? I am sitting at the table on today with my friend Landon Batten, and I am so excited about the conversation that we will be having on today. I am really excited. And I don't know if you all know this already, but we are both wearing the color purple. You might have seen in the tagline where it said, when I think about forgiveness, I think about the color purple. And we had a conversation. I'm gonna say one thing about Landon, and then I'm gonna allow Landon to take a moment and to kind of introduce himself because people can kind of introduce themselves better than anybody else, right? But Landon and I can talk all day. And what I love is that, which says, Landon, that you're very well grounded. He's young, but let me tell you, Landon knows a lot of stuff about a lot of different kinds of topics. So we can literally, if someone put a bowl in front of us and had topics and pulled it out, we can go. We can talk about it all day long, pretty much. So I'm so glad that Landon agreed to sit at the table, and this is his first time, but it won't be his last. It will not be his last. So Landon has a lot to say and a lot to share. So first, before we move forward, I want to allow him to take a moment and introduce himself in however way he would like to share who he is and anything else he'd like to say about himself.
Okay, well, my name is Landon. As Pastor had said, I'm her friend, and we can talk about a lot of different things. But this I'm kind of nervous today, but this is my first time doing anything like this. But today I know we're going to be talking about a very important topic. So I'm very excited for our conversation today, and I appreciate y'all for tuning in.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so as Landon said, this is it's a very important topic, and it's really kind of a very serious topic, and it's something that, listen, if you live long enough and you haven't been through this particular topic, keep on, as my mama would say, keep on living, honey. Just keep on living, and you'll get there. But many of us have struggled in this area, so I'm going to go back to the initial title. We're talking about actually about, well, I'm gonna get there in a moment, but let me go back to when I think of forgiveness, I think of the color purple. And I kind of thought about the movie because it's not where we were going.
No,
We wasn't going to the color
no,
purple.
we weren't.
But you know what? I kind of thought about the color purple. I thought about Celie. I thought about all that Mister took her through.
Correct.
But towards the end of the movie, and many of you out there, you've seen The Color Purple, you've watched it, etc. Put thumbs up, put a message in there, say yes, I saw it. But Celie actually, in order for her to move on, she became very successful in the end. She had her own shop and all that good stuff. In order for her to move on and be healed, she had to forgive Mister. So when I think about the color purple, I think about forgiveness. And the color purple, I want to say this because kind of how we got to the color purple is one of the things that the color purple represents is forgiveness. So that's so powerful. So we're here wearing our purple. And so if that didn't give you a key in or eye in on what we're talking about today, we are talking about forgiveness. And we're talking about the road to release, a journey of forgiveness. And that is so very important and so very key because so very key because so many people in the world that we live in experience hurt, still walking in pain, and have an issue in reference to forgiveness and being forgiven. So I want to give Landon the opportunity. We're going to talk a little bit around that. And I want you to just kind of share your story of forgiveness. And before we get there, because all of us that have been hurt or some offended or whatever the case may be, have a story around forgiveness. So I'm going to give Landon an opportunity to share his story around forgiveness because Landon has a very powerful story of forgiveness, and he can tell you who's in the center of allowing him and giving him the strength to be able to release on this road, on this journey of towards forgiveness?
Well, my story of forgiveness, of course, it didn't take me long to learn this lesson about forgiveness because we all have experiences in life. But me, I was raised in a household that was, to use a lack, that was chaotic. I was really, it was a violent, very, not the best environment for a kid to grow up in. But it took me, I went to college, left the experience, and it took me about 2 to 3 years before I really learned what forgiveness really meant. Because of course I was raised a Christian. To forgive someone is good. So I was like, okay, I forgive them, but in my spirit I had not forgiven them.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me a while to understand really what the difference is between saying it and actually experiencing what forgiveness is.
That's good.
And we all have roads, and like Pastor said earlier, you have to live some if you've not experienced the need to forgive someone yet, because it doesn't. Everyone has people they need forgiveness.
That's right. And I want to just ask you about the point you made about saying it and experiencing it is two different things. Because oftentimes we do say, "Oh, I forgive you, or I forgive them, rather, I forgive them," and then when we encounter them again, or we see them again, or we are in a place or location that brings back to our recollection something that happened to us, then what we felt like or what we said with our mouth goes right out the door. Right. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think that people first need to understand what forgiveness is,
Mm-hmm.
because there's not really, people don't understand. People have their own definition for what forgiveness is.
That's right. Very
One of
good.
my favorite is from Oprah, and Oprah says that forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could have been any different.
That's right.
And for me, when I think about forgiveness, the word acceptance comes to mind. And most people, if you read like spiritual books, they'll say that forgiveness leads to acceptance. But in my life, what I've seen, I believe acceptance leads to forgiveness. And when I'm talking about acceptance, people get up in arms about what am I talking about accepting? I'm not talking about accepting. Of course, you want to accept what happened to you, but what you really want to accept is that it did happen to you, not that it has happened.
Right.
That it did happen to you.
That it did happen to you.
Because we
That's
all
right.
hold judgments
That's
against
right.
people, and those are what keep us in unforgiveness. Is holding judgments, the shoulda, coulda, wouldas.
That's right.
It's not really usually what happened. It's like, my parents should have done this, or my ex-husband or my ex-wife should have done this.
That's right.
They shouldn't have hit me.
That's
but
right.
they did.
Right.
We live in the shoulda and the coulda, and that's what keeps us in unforgiveness. And we have to really move to accepting what has happened to us has happened.
Right.
And like you mentioned, and like I said before, forgiveness is a choice, and it's not an emotion.
Right.
It's not an emotion.
It's a choice.
It's a choice, and it's a process.
And it's not an easy choice.
No.
When you think about things that happen to you, things that people did to you or against you, it's not easy really to forgive. Although when we are clear about what Jesus said about forgiveness, and that sometimes is what kind of pulls us back to like, oh my goodness, wait a minute. Jesus said that he will forgive us the same way that we forgive others. And that sometimes can put us in a hard place because it's like, but they did this to me, but then we hear the words of the Lord in the scripture. We hear his voice saying, but I forgive you the same way that you forgive somebody else. So if you don't forgive, that means that he won't forgive us, which is so extremely hard because he died for us, right? And, when I think about, I know myself, I can use as an example of an experience when, when someone did something to me or against me, and I was like, oh, I was so very upset. And, when the question was asked, do you forgive me? What came out of my mouth, I didn't even know was in there because I quickly said, with scripture, I said, of course, I have to forgive you. Because if I don't forgive you, the Lord won't forgive me. Because I know I'm not perfect, right? And I know that I need the Lord. And I think when we know how much we need the Lord, then we have to say, God, help me in the places where I am struggling to forgive. And I don't know, there may be some people out there that have experienced the difficulty or the challenges with forgiving people, but forgiveness is a deep thing, especially when you're hurt in a deep way.
Correct, because usually what happens is we have the experience, then we then we straight. The first thing we do is go to anger,
Right.
and we're angry at the person, but people don't really think. Most people get angry at God
Yeah.
because really, when you really learn to forgive, though, truly, what you when you stay in unforgiveness, you're actually denying the hand of God in your life because you're saying
That's good.
that things should have been the way I wanted them to be,
Right.
not the way they were.
Right.
So, and that shows a lack of trust in God. And I think that's why one thing I had to learn, I had to forgive myself for not forgiving God. I had to forgive myself for blaming God.
Right. Right. Wow.
Because we do blame God, especially people who are raised in church. We believe that God's hand is in everything. So if we take that a step further, so you're saying that God let this happen to me. God let me get abused. God let me get raped. God let me, and then we are left with that, and we're like, why God?
Right.
And we end up blaming God.
Right. And that's true, and it's interesting that you said that because oftentimes we are looking, naturally, we are navigating this world through our lenses rather than through the lens of Jesus, not seeing what he had planned. I had watched a video the other day about it was a young lady who she began to tell her story of hurt. She said her family members began molesting her when she was age 3. And so she said every time her mother was very unstable, they went from place to place, home to home. And every time they moved to a different place, again, some person in the family would molest her. And so she got raped at 12 by her cousin. She never told her grandmother, paternal grandmother, because she was moved back and forth between maternal grandma, paternal grandma. And so this time she was with the paternal grandma. The father was around, and she would always tell her dad she hated him and all those things. So anyway, long story short, she got pregnant at 12, and they gave her this whole big lecture, about look at you, how could you, shame on you, bad, bad, bad. But no one ever sat her down and asked her story. No one ever sat her down and asked her, what's going on? Let's have a conversation. Is there something you need to tell me about anything? And but thank God she ended up with 2 more kids before she turned 18. But she, eventually gave her life to the Lord, and that's how she came about telling her story.
But when you were saying about they didn't ever ask, you kind of get to a big point about most people think that forgiveness happens when someone asks for an apology. But actually, forgiveness does not happen if you're waiting for an apology. That's not true forgiveness. True forgiveness is something that happens with yourself. It does not happen with anybody else. Like it is between you and God. That's the only people. It's not the person who did it, the bystander. Is between you and God. And people wait for an apology. But just take my situation for example. I have never gotten an apology or even an acknowledgement of anything that I experienced when I was growing up. But I still live from a place of forgiveness, and I have fully, and I can say in 100% in the truth of God, that I have truly forgiven the people that did things to me when I was younger that were truly horrendous. Because it was something that I had to work on myself, not waiting on someone else to apologize to me. But I think pride and ego keeps us wanting an apology.
Right.
And we won't, and let's just be real. A lot of people want to see people get what they deserve. Right. A lot of people want to see people get what they deserve.
Now, that's a good word right there.
People want to see
people want to see people. Yeah. They want to see people get what they deserve.
Yes, and that keeps you in unforgiveness for years and decades.
That's right. And that's true. Yeah. People really do want to see people, they did X, Y, and Z to me, and I hope they get it back. I hope somebody does this to them. I hope, and that is true, and when we're able to release that and give that to God, it really sets us in a different place.
Correct. And us talking about forgiveness, people hold unforgiveness for a lot of reasons.
Right.
They think unforgiveness is power.
Mm-hmm.
They think that to forgive is to deny what they experienced.
Right.
But they're missing the point that
Mhm.
unforgiveness does not hurt the other person.
That's right.
Unforgiveness hurts you.
That's right.
I'd actually heard this story of someone who was not forgiving someone. They went shopping.
Mm-hmm.
And they had hold all this unforgiveness in their heart. And all of a sudden, across the street, they seen them over there laughing with their friend, and they said, "How are they laughing when I'm been holding all this anger and unforgiveness against them? They're just
Right.
living their life, and I'm over here crying about it
And all upset.
and all upset." But the thing is, you have to do what's best for you, and forgiveness is the best thing you can do. And also, back to the thing about apology, people think apology doesn't set you free. Forgiveness sets you free.
Mm-hmm.
I've never read anything
That's
about
right.
the apology set me free.
That's
I've
right.
never heard, but people will say forgiveness set
Set
them
you
free.
free.
So
Yeah.
that's very, very important to remember that.
It is. And one thing you just said was about the power in reference to power of forgiveness. And actually, when you don't forgive, actually the other person is the one that holds the power. Because as you said, they've moved
Right.
on. They're laughing and cackling in some other
Yeah.
setting with somebody else, and you're angry and upset, and you know stressed. And
Mhm.
when you see them, it kind of starts bringing back up these memories, and you know, and those places are hard. That is when we have to literally ask the Lord to forgive us, to help us to forgive,
Right.
because you know it's tough because the mind. We talk about the mind, right? We talk about the mind and how the mind it locks in memory. It
Mhm.
locks in good memory, and it also locks in memories that's not so good.
Right.
I shared with Landon when I was in school. I was studying school psychology for a moment, and I went up to my professor after class and I said, "Listen." I started explaining to him this wonderful doll that my parents bought me. Anybody, I might age myself right now, but I had a Flip Wilson doll. Anybody else out there had a Flip Wilson doll? And so y'all remember Flip Wilson, and Flip Wilson would change himself to Geraldine. And so Flip Wilson had a doll. You would pull the string, and one side was Flip Wilson, and the other side of the doll was Geraldine. And it would say either something he would say or the doll. So or Geraldine. It would say something like, "The ugly people know who they are, don't they?" Now, this been years, y'all. See, I can still remember. So I said to my professor, I said, "Listen, I need to get that out of there. Because I got a lot of things I need to study and I need more space to get in, more information." And what he shared with me was that that has been reserved in my permanent memory because that doll was so important to me and I really loved it. So while that etched itself in my permanent memory and it was a good thing, bad things also will etch themselves in our permanent memory.
True, and you just went straight to what I was thinking about memories.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people say, "I'll forgive, but I won't
I
forget."
won't forget.
But
That's right.
every time I hear someone say that, this is just my experience in my mind, and more than likely they have not truly forgiven that person. Because when we're talking about releasing, of course you don't want to what you want holding on to memories keeps us hostage to the past.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's it's just so very it's so very important to let go of the memories. I'm not saying deny your experience,
Mm-hmm.
but true forgiveness, like from my experience growing up, I never think about what I went through. Never. I don't toss and turn at night thinking about it. I don't tell other people about it. I don't call my friend talking about things that happened to me 15 years ago because I've truly let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And true forgiveness, you can tell by if you truly forgiven it if you don't bring it up no more.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think about what the Bible says, keep no records of wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Love keeps no records of wrongs.
Love keeps
And-
no records of wrong.
And
Let's pause right there.
Yeah.
Love keeps no records of wrongs. Go ahead.
Yes, and it's just you can know when you truly forgiven when you can think about it and not feel bad or not feel pain or do not want
Right.
to cry about it.
Right.
Because I can sit here and talk about the stuff I went through and not bust into tears or
Mm-hmm.
call home about it, write about it, because
Mhm.
I've truly moved past it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course with faith and with God
Mhm.
and also with just true forgiveness. And if anybody's listening, I think it's very important to say this. People, it's so hard to forgive family members for stuff. People find it easier to forgive friends than they do for family members.
Mm.
But I want to tell anyone
This
that's
is true.
listening,
All right.
anyone that's listening,
Uh-huh.
to forgive yourself for not forgiving your parents, because your parents do not know any better. You might have think they knew better, but they did the best they could, regardless of whether you think they knew better or not. And we have to forgive our parents, because you have to think God brought us through our parents for a reason. And I want anybody that has unforgiveness against their parents, their brothers, their sisters, learn to forgive them.
Yes.
Learn to forgive them, because they didn't, even though you think they knew better, they do not know any better. So I want to tell anybody that can listen, it's very important to forgive your family, because God put you in your family for a reason.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and for sharing that part of kind of helping people to understand that it is important to forgive, especially those that you love. I want to ask a question. I know we're getting close to time, but I want to ask kind of so when you ask the person to forgive you that brought about harm in your life, and they did not acknowledge or apologize, how did you move on from there? Did you move on? Did you get?
I did move on, but it took a while. It took a while because I just wanted them to acknowledge it.
Okay.
Because I just wanted it. Because it's like we need them to acknowledge it, because it kind of makes them accountable. Because acknowledgement is accountability, and like we said before, we want somebody to be accountable.
Right.
We want somebody to pay for it. We want somebody to pay for it.
That's right.
But I kept on crying. I remember calling and just crying. Why won't you acknowledge it? And the person on the line just was quiet, didn't say no, and they never even acknowledged it. But what I had to do was establish boundaries.
Okay.
Establish boundaries. And I want to tell people that forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Because you don't have to reconcile just because you forgive someone. You can forgive someone and not have them in your life. You can forgive the abusive husband and still choose to get a divorce.
Right.
You don't have to stay there.
I like what you said, create boundaries. It's very important.
Create boundaries.
You need to create boundaries to allow yourself to stay free.
To stay, yes.
Right.
Because, and I believe that boundaries is the glue that keeps forgiveness together when you are talking about forgiving someone that you still have a relationship with. Boundaries are not really that necessary when you like just say, I'm not going to talk to you anymore after you forgive it. And some people think when you establish that I'm not going to talk to you anymore, that means you're not forgiven.
Right.
That's not the case.
Right.
You can truly forgive someone and just not have them in your life anymore.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you are still holding on to anger and unforgiveness by not having them in your life. Sometimes you need that space to work and do the work, because like I said before, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, not a gift that you give someone else.
That's right.
So you have to take time to do the work, and it takes time. It's not something that happens overnight.
Yes.
Like I said, it's took me about 3 to 4 years for me to ever fully stand in true forgiveness of what I had experienced growing up.
And that is so key, the point you just made, to do the work, because there is a work that you have to do. And I think sometimes we tend to believe that, oh, I forgive them and we move on. But there's a work that you have to do to continuously walk in this road of forgiveness, to release yourself from being, held hostage by the incident or what has happened. And guess what? If you need to sit down on a clinical counselor's couch, it's okay.
Yeah.
It is okay. Sometimes those things are needed and they're necessary. But there is a work that we have to do in order for us to be able to really freely move into the next place and spaces that God has for us. The enemy works in all kinds of things, especially in unforgiveness. If he can hold us hostage right there, it will keep us from moving forward into the things that God really desires for us to do.
Yeah, and what I was just I'd read something one time that you open the door to forgiving others when your desire to be better outweighs your desire for revenge and your desire for payback, and when your desire to get better is higher than your anger tank, that's when the door to forgiveness opens. You have to want to forgive.
That's
and
right.
You cannot offer forgiveness and then deep down won't pay back, because that's not true forgiveness, and that doesn't stay. You have to offer forgiveness from a place of compassion.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's not true forgiveness to say, I forgive you, and then deep in your mind, but I hope you get what you deserve. That's not true forgiveness. That's actually just deceit. You're just deceiving yourself, and you're deceiving the other person. Yes.
Yeah, that was so good what you just said. And I picked up on something that you said, and I know we're down to the end of our time. But one thing that you said, I'm going to close with this. I'm going to give, I tend to, especially when I'm like teaching Bible study and etc. I like to give people an at-home assignment. So with something that you just said, before we close, I want to challenge everyone out there to go and check your anger tank. I like that because when we are I haven't forgiven people, and a part of that, of course, has to do with anger because we're still angry about what has happened to us, what they did to us, and the fact that they won't acknowledge and or apologize. And so there may still be some anger in some tanks out there. So I challenge you, my brother. I challenge you, my sister, to take a look at your anger tank and see where it's at and ask God, Lord, there's some anger in my tank, and I need for you to help me to release what I'm holding on to. Well, guess what? We are out of time, but not out of conversation.
Correct.
This has been absolutely amazing. I'm so excited that we've had this time together. I want to thank those that are watching with us live via Facebook and also YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Hit the subscribe button so you'll be receive a notification when we're live. And then, of course, before I leave today, I want to thank our guest at the table today for Real Talk, and that is Landon Batten. Thank you so much. And listen, Landon does not live around the corner from where we are recording our show from. So he actually drove from out of the area to come and be a part of the show on today. So I'm so thankful for you. And I'm thankful for you coming and sharing about your release to the road of forgiveness and how it can also help others. Well, God bless each and every one of you. I'm thankful again for you all tuning in to Real Talk with Dr. Laura. And guess what? I look forward to seeing you next Sunday live at 5. God bless you. Have an amazing week.